Brady Quinn, former Notre Dame quarterback, Fox college football analyst, big noon kickoff, also does 2 pros and a cup of Joe. He's a busy man. And Brady and the crew in Columbus on Saturday, Maryland, Ohio State at the Horseshoe. Got interesting there in the first half, and then Ohio State blew out the Terps. Brady joining us via the phone. Where do you want to start with college football this weekend?
I guess we can start with a lot of the upsets. It was one of those weekends where I think we had a number of matchups where it was kind of a prove it your record. Maryland, for example, was 5-0, taking on obviously an undefeated Ohio State team. And, I think as you pointed out, they put up a good fight for the first half, and then Ohio State really took control in the second half. And you could probably talk about a number of matchups, Oklahoma and Texas, same thing. I didn't see Oklahoma really taking control of that game the way they did, and Dylan Gabriel kind of coming away as the Heisman favorite based on what we saw so far this year. Quinn Ewers in Texas have been much more tested, given their big win over Bama, had a really huge win over Kansas, which was a top 25 team at the time. Oklahoma played a much softer schedule, but boy, were they up for the moment. And you mentioned Dylan Gabriel's Heisman favorite. He's got to be right up there next to the Caleb Williams of the world and the Michael Penix right now with the way he's played so far.
Caleb Williams is going to continue to put up big numbers, Brady, because he has to, because the defense is so bad. It's not like you can take him out of a game or change your game plan. They have to put their foot on the accelerator the rest of the season.
Yeah, and that's been the case the past, really 2 years. If you go back to last year, this defense hit the transfer portal hard. I want to say they had 5 or 6 starters on their 2D that basically came via the transfer portal. And, that's going to take some time for those guys to gel and adjust. But the tackling is the biggest thing that stands out, where that was a huge issue for them last year, even though they were decimated at times with injuries and they were thin as it was. But now this year they're supposed to be better. They're supposed to be more talented. They played a soft schedule coming into this past week. And, you figure they should be able to control more games, and they're just not able to. They have to win in a shootout every single week. And that's a lot of pressure, especially when you're talking about the Pac-12 that probably has the most parity of any conference in its final year as we know it. And, eventually that's going to catch up to USC. It caught up to them last year. They couldn't get past Utah. And obviously this week they take on my Fighting Irish, which have issues of their own. But when you look at the schedule that USC has ahead, including Notre Dame, and having to go through, a team like Utah, who knows if Cam Rising's back or not, but Washington out there as well, and Oregon. It is a gauntlet, a brutal schedule that they've got to play, and their defense has to find a quick turnaround or has to find some answers fast.
I don't know if you remember this conversation we had in Dublin, Ireland, and you said to me, Duke and Louisville, that concerns you about Notre Dame. And you wouldn't be surprised if they lost to one of those two. They barely squeaked by Duke. They ended up losing to Louisville. Also throw in the trap game with USC in the on-deck circle. So assess Notre Dame now.
Yeah, I think the one thing we didn't know is, how many of these games would be in prime time. You knew Ohio State, you knew USC, and then you saw Duke and Louisville get flexed into it. And for people out there who are probably going to say, hey, this is making an excuse, it's not an excuse. I experienced it. Notre Dame hasn't won back-to-back weeks on the road versus 2 top 25 opponents since I was there. So I understand the difficulty of the schedule and navigating it and how hard it can be when you're talking about week after week after week, being in tough, tight games, physical games, and then have to do it in prime time and then turning around, getting back late at night and having to deal with everything else to get back up the next week. To me, watching them, they look tired. I don't want to take anything away from what Jeff Brom and his staff did and the players did, because by far and away, Louisville dominated that game. I give them a ton of credit. Ron English, their defensive coordinator, is one of the better defensive minds, in my opinion, in college football. I don't know that he gets enough praise for the job he does week in and week out. But Louisville just really took it to him. And look, there's a lot of things that I think were going on up front for Notre Dame. The offensive line was rotating some of the guys up front. That's always going to be tough in a really loud, tough environment to be able to have those guys, kind of figure some things out. If they're all kind of struggling and you're rotating some of those pieces, I think there's some questionable decisions too that were made throughout the course of the game. And the downfield passing that Notre Dame was so effective with early in the season clearly has gone to the wayside in the past few weeks. And when you can't create some of those big plays, like Louisville did, especially with Jordan at running back and how explosive he was, you're obviously going to have a hard time, being able to show up in some of those big moments. So, right now you can't feel sorry for yourself. You got to move on. You got a really good USC team coming in town. And that's the tough thing is if you're this Notre Dame team right now, you've got to be resilient. You have to have a bunch of leaders, and in particular, Sam Hartman, who's the elder statesman in the locker room. He's got to rally these guys and make sure they understand there's a lot of football left to be played. They can't feel sorry for themselves just because of their performance this past Saturday.
Talking to Brady Quinn, former Notre Dame quarterback, now working for Fox, their college football analyst. Explain to me what happened in the Miami-Georgia Tech game. How do you come up with that coaching decision?
Well, I can give you an answer. It's not one that I necessarily subscribe to, but you've got a player who's on the cusp of running for 100 yards. And in the back of your mind, when you're a play caller, you're sitting there saying to him, hey, let's give Chaney the ball. Let's get him over 100 yards today. You're not thinking about the negative consequences or losing in that instance, right? Like that almost never happens. And so at 99 yards, he gets the football. He runs for 4. He breaks. He gets over it. And, of course, he fumbles. So then you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, they don't have any timeouts, and they haven't done much. I mean, is Haynes King really going to drive them down the field for a touchdown to go win this thing? And, of course, then that happens. So, look, the justification for why you hand the football off and actually run a play, it's never going to matter to people. That's most likely the explanation behind it. And I think that's the tough part is for Miami, for this team, like those are the sorts of decisions that when you really boil it down, more teams lose games than win games. And this was an example of that in Miami. Instead of putting themselves in a position where they can move on, get the win, it was a tough game, and have a shot at, playing for the ACC and all that. I mean, they got to play UNC this week. It's a tough matchup. Now they put themselves where there's no room for error the rest of the season. And that was just because of one lack of oversight from Mario Cristobal or lack of thinking about the downside risk that you're going to be facing.
Yeah, it was the first thing I wondered when they were running is that running back close to 100 yards? And then now he hasn't said that was the reason why they did it. Probably, he's trying to move on. He said, I told him to keep 2 hands on the ball. You don't have to keep 2 hands on the ball if you take a knee, Coach. But it felt like the dog ate my homework there. I want to get your opinion on Brock Purdy. How does this happen? You play at Iowa State, you're Mr. Irrelevant, and now you're an MVP candidate.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a number of things. I mean, it happens from his experience, his maturity, kind of the moxie he carries himself with. I mean, he's played a lot of football. And so when he gets the opportunity, he's ready from kind of at least a college experience as far as knowing what he is, who he is, and being confident in his abilities. And then you put him into a position where he plays in a system that is as quarterback friendly as anyone. And that's not saying, and I've heard this narrative a lot, oh, he's a system quarterback. I never really understand why people look at that as a negative. Like, I would love to have been called a system quarterback in the NFL. That means you've probably played in a great system, won a lot of games, put up a lot of numbers, had a lot of success. Yeah. Usually that comes with that system quarterback tag. But he is in a great system. Like, Kyle Shanahan is one of the best, if not the best, offensive mind. You look at the coaching tree from Mike Shanahan and Kyle Shanahan and how it's impacted the NFL and the offenses right now that are successful. So he's with a great play caller. He's surrounded by a ton of talent. I mean, so many different players that can do different things, whether it's Debo or George Kittle or Christian McCaffrey or Brendan Ayuk, who's really kind of blossomed all this. Juszczyk at fullback. I mean, they do a bunch of different things, and it puts so much stress on defenses. But the thing that I'm most impressed with for a guy who's got 10-0 in his first 10 starts is how well he navigates the pocket and still keeps his eyes downfield and then find those second, third windows for guys. And that's hard to do for veteran quarterbacks, let alone a guy who's played this few games. So, look, it's justified. He should be in the MVP conversation because that alone has been elite this year as far as his ability to still continue to make throws under duress outside the pocket, but get him to the right guy in the right spot at the right time. It can't be understated the impact he's obviously had on this team.
Would you rather have Dak Prescott or Brock Purdy?
What team are they playing for?
Well, how about I start a franchise?
I mean, it's tough to not look at the body of work of what Dak has been able to do. I mean, I don't want to sound like a flavor of the week guy. Well, I'd rather start with Brock Purdy, but you put Brock Purdy on a different team. Like, I don't know that we're talking about the same success.
So if Brock Purdy is on the Cowboys.
Yeah, I don't know that you're seeing the same type of success they've had with the 49ers.
Okay.
Because look, I'm a Dak fan. I'm someone who's continually tried to, praise him for the job that he's done in handling all of that. I mean, they've obviously had issues on the offensive line. We saw that again resurface last night. There's a lot of tough things, I think, as far as being the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, and a lot of things you have to deal with. But I think Dak has handled tremendously well. So, I would still lean towards Dak. It's not a knock to Brock. It's just I think you put Dak Prescott on the 49ers, he's probably having a lot of success too.
Yeah, I've mentioned this quite a few times, and that is where you're drafted, who's drafting you, what kind of talent. Mac Jones, to me, if Mac Jones was on the Niners, we would probably be praising Mac Jones. Fair enough to say?
Yeah, I mean, look, how many quarterbacks have started for Kyle Shanahan and not excelled? I think Trey Lance is the only one that had struggled, and granted, what did he get, 4 starts in his career there, which is probably unfair to view him off a small sample size. But most quarterbacks who've been able to play for Kyle Shanahan have had success. It's one of the reasons why I call him one of, if not the best offensive mind in the NFL, because he maximizes the ability and the talents of every single quarterback that plays in his system.
Are you guys on the road this weekend?
We are. We're in a very familiar place to me. Somewhat familiar to some other folks on our Big Noon crew. Will be in South Bend, Indiana.
Nice. What kind of welcome do you get when you walk in?
Hey, what's up, dude? Hey, man. Go Irish.
What if this was at USC?
The 4-letter words and everything else, and I would just ask them if their parents paid for them to get into school or did some elaborate cheating scheme to get them there, that sort of thing. Man. I mean, how much does the degree cost there is really what I usually end up saying. So,
wow. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Little degree smack talk there, a little entrance.
There's no love lost. There's no love lost, between Notre Dame and USC. So
you earned your scholarship at Notre Dame.
I'll put it this way. I went to all my classes. I did not excel at all my classes, but I worked hard. I got my degree in finance, and my second major was political science, and I really valued that. I can't say the same for everyone else, out there in the college football world of these other schools.
Are you talking about Leinart in particular?
I did not say. I did not say that. I do know this. I do know he took ballroom dancing, and I'm pretty sure it's not offered at Notre Dame. I'm almost positive.
Did he get an A in ballroom dancing is what I want to know.
I mean, based on the dance moves that I've seen in our free time, I would have to think yes. All right. That man can dance.
Oh.
He's got very nimble feet. You wouldn't think that because how tall he is.
Yeah.
Very nimble feet. He glides across the dance floor.
Wow.
Remember Wayne's World where Michael Myers kind of glides? I think what was her name? Cassandra?
Yeah.
Kind of glides to her. It's almost like that.
Safe travels there, and good to talk to you again. Thank you, Brady.
Thank you. Always good being on.
That's Brady Quinn. Some may refer to him as Beef O'Brady, but it'll be the Big Noon Kickoff. It'll be Notre Dame and USC.